Welcome back for day 2 of the workshop. Yesterday, we went through the Unreal Editor, we looked at the UI, we did some composition with the Cine Camera Actor, and we looked at some of the settings in the Camera Actor tool. Today, we are moving on to part 2 of the workshop where we will be going through lighting. We are then going to do a small sequence with the camera that we have created. We'll create some small animation with the camera, and then we will do a quick, simple render. So, all good. So I'm very excited to see what you guys are working on and what you all have created. Somebody shared a very cool render and it was looking very good. But I'm excited to look at where everybody is at. And do you have any questions? The stuff yesterday was very simple and basic. So unless you had a technical issue with the things that we spoke about a lot yesterday, like installation and some weird thing can happen, like if you're working with Unreal for the first time especially, or even like after years, you can still face something new every day. But moving on, if everything went well, so we are going to continue, and if you don't have any questions, we will move on to lighting. Okay, so you remember we created this camera yesterday. Our subject was the trash bin, and we positioned it around focusing on the trash can. So now in this sequence, we have some other cameras also, which you would have seen, you would have explored. So this is the white camera. Now, what we will do is we are going to look at the lighting. So I'm going to keep the frame locked on this camera view, and we are going to start working with lighting. So looking at the lighting setup. So if you look in the outliner, there is a lighting folder, and I'm going to be removing all of this. Now, to remove all of this, I just simply don't want to delete it. So I'll be showing you a cool way of splitting this light setup into a sub-level. So what we have right now is a level, and we will be creating another level that will be nested in this main level, and that is going to be the sub level, which is going to have this light setup. And then we are going to start lighting from scratch and exploring the different lights that are available in the editor. Okay, sounds good. So to create a new sub level, we are going to go to Windows, and here we have this option called levels. So let's click on it. I'm going to dock this here in this side. Now you see this shows right now that we are in the persistent level, and the persistent level is the main level which has all the assets that are there that you see in the viewport that are there in the outliner. They are going to be there in the persistent level. So if I turn off the persistent level, everything disappears. Okay. Now, in order to split this lighting setup, we are going to go to this levels tab and click on this icon. And here we have some options when we scroll down. We're going to click on create new. Now, what this does is it's basically creating a level for us. And we just have to move this light setup into a new level. So we are going to go with an empty level. So it's not going to have any asset, anything in it. Okay, and I'm going to create a folder here called sub levels. And I will call it lighting scene 1. Okay. So right now this is completely empty. What we will do first is we are going to select all of this here that we see we're going to click select it, okay, including the everything that is inside the folder we'll be selecting, and right click on the sublevel that we created and go move selected actors to level. Okay, now let me expand this outliner slightly, and here if you pay attention to the outliner, there is a levels section, and over here you can see that the level for these light setup has changed, and now it's under lighting scene 1, whereas everything else is in landscape kit bash, which is our persistent level. Okay, and now if we turn off this icon, so the lighting disappears. So this way we have created a sublevel which contains one lighting scenario. Okay, let me adjust this. Now you must be thinking like, what is this blue dot next to the sublevel? So this indicates that this sublevel or this level is going to be streamed when you're using a blueprint. So instead, what we are going to go with is always loaded. So whenever you are opening the level or you're rendering a camera in this level, this is always going to be loaded. You don't need to trigger it. Okay, so this is all set up. Let's turn it off and let's save this. So I'm going to go with save all. Okay, and now is the time that we will start creating our light setup. So here you can see that we have some lights, then we have some other volumes that are going to be available in the VFX column, like volumetric cloud, height fog, all of this. But what I'm going to show you is another tool that is very helpful for outdoor lighting, and you will find it here in the Windows tab and in ENV Light Mixer. So this tool gives you the entire light setup that is required for an outdoor setup, for outdoor lighting, in just one window. So it's very easy to know like what all light actors you need to have in the environment to recreate a sun-like lighting. Okay, so the directional light, this is the first light that we are going to add. Then we are going to add a skylight, a sky atmosphere, a volumetric cloud, and a height fog. Okay. And wait a minute. So what happened here is all the new lights that I added got added into the sublevel because this sublevel was selected. So if I want to move the lights into the persistent level, I will have to double click on the persistent level and then move all of those lights to the persistent level. So let me just select all of this and I will move it here. Move selected actors to level. And now let's turn this off. Okay, and I'm going to put this all in a new folder called lighting 2. Oh. And let's call this one lighting 1. And let's create another sublevel with the new light setup. So I'm just going to create a new one, empty level, and call it lighting scene 2. And add this entire setup that we created in this one. Here it is. And change this method to always loaded. Okay, so this is your lighting scenario 1 and this is the new one. Okay, let's keep saving it. Now let's look at the setup that we have so far. So I'm going to get out of the window of the camera view and slightly move out of the environment. Okay, so here we can see everything. Now let's turn it off, everything, and I'm going to turn it on one by one. So this first light that we have is the directional light. Let's call it our sun, because this is going to be the main source of light. So this one, this is the one that is acting like the sun. So how this works is, if you move this light, if you transform it, it has no effect at all. If you want to change the way it is acting, then for that you can rotate it, and that's how it is going to affect the environment. So if you are not satisfied with the light setup, with the directional light, and you want a different angle, so you can rotate it, but you cannot transform it. It doesn't do anything when you're transforming it. So that is our sun. Now in the sun settings, I want to show you one thing which is very important here. When we scroll down, there is a section called atmosphere and cloud, which says atmosphere sunlight. Okay, so if I turn this off, and let me turn on the sky atmosphere. Okay, actually, hold on. So I'll go back to the sunlight and I'll keep this on. And now when I'm turning on the sky atmosphere, we can see there is an atmosphere being created around the environment. And the reason it is happening is because the sky atmosphere works with the directional light, and in order to work correctly and in order to be visible, you need to have the atmosphere sunlight enabled in the directional light. So if I turn it off, then this is just a directional light and it is not the sunlight. So if I am moving it in any angle, it is just going to change the direction of highlights and shadows. But when I have atmosphere sunlight enabled, that means this directional light is the sunlight, and then I am rotating this light, then you can see it replicates the actual sunlight, where you can see from the morning till evening all the lighting scenarios. So this is a very important thing to keep an eye for, and by default it will be checked on. If you, but this does not work when you don't have the sky atmosphere on. So both of these work together to give you this look. Okay, now after this we are going to look at let's look at the volumetric cloud. So this is just adding a cloud setup in the environment. Okay, the cloud has some settings. You can change the bottom altitude, you can change the height, this one is not going to be very high cinematic quality. You can see as I'm going closer, there is some volume that you can see. So you can still achieve a really good result with these clouds, but there is a ultra dynamic sky plugin which is available on Fab. Now that is a paid plugin, but sometimes on Fab there are items available every month for free, so keep an eye out for that. Let me open Fab. Okay, this is the home page, and somewhere it should show free items, free for a month, and you can download those. They are going to be they can be environment or tools or materials or anything. So just keep an eye out for that. Let me also search if I can find it. Okay, so the thing with Fab is it has been, okay, here is the Ultra Dynamic Sky plugin that I was talking about. Right now it is on sale. It's in Indian rupees, so don't freak out. It's not dollars, $3,000. It's 3,000 rupees, so it's pretty cheap. So this gives you a very good, high quality sky setup, and it has all of these tools inbuilt. Okay, so back to the clouds. So we saw the bottom altitude, and then we have layer height, and it's changing the height of the clouds, as you can see. Then tracing max distance, so till the point where the clouds will be visible. And if you want to play with it, experiment, and get something like a stylized look, then you can come to the cloud material and start changing the material. So I know we're not getting into materials, but I will quickly show you some of the settings that are there, and it is not very complicated. It will be easy to understand. So you'll find the cloud material in this cloud material section. And let's open this. So here you have some settings which just leave it as it is. And then we have a cloud shape section. In that we have cloud albedo, and let's change the colors. Here we make it red, and you can see like the cloud setup is, clouds are now red. So let's say like I want Mars like sky, so I can, or like something like a fantasy land where I want like colorful clouds and color in the atmosphere. So you can play with this direction of the light, of the sunlight. And in the sky atmosphere, we have some more settings that are going to change the way light reacts in the real world when it hits certain particles. So for that, we have two options here. One is the Rayleigh scattering scale, and then there is a Mies scattering scale. So when we are changing the value in Rayleigh scattering scale, you can see the scatter increases. It becomes more warm, more yellowish. Whereas when we are changing the Mies scattering scale, you can see the sky starts looking more dense. So it is closer to a scenario where there are more pollutants in the atmosphere. So you can change the Mies scattering scale, and it gives you that dystopian kind of look. These are some good values that are going to very quickly allow you to completely change the look of the scene. Now back to the material. So albedo color is what you should be looking at if you want to change the color of the clouds. I'm going to reset it back to white. Okay, and now something that is very jarring to the eye right now is this gap that we see between the landscape and the sky. It is really extremely distracting and doesn't look good at all. So to fix that, we have the height fog. Let's bring it in the scene. And now suddenly you can see that there is fog in the environment and everything is well blended. There is more depth. And in this angle, like let's position the camera here. So I'm just quickly going to show you a quick way of bookmarking this camera view. So instead of creating a new camera, I can just set a bookmark for this. So what I will have to do is go to perspective, bookmarks, and then I can go to set bookmark and set it as bookmark 0. So if I am moving the camera and I press 0 on the keyboard, it is going to take me back to the same view. So that's a very useful useful way of blocking some camera views just for your own just to make sure, like, just to compare between different cameras, but without creating any cameras. So another way of doing the same thing is control plus the number on the keyboard, and it's going to set a bookmark on that number. So I have 0 for this camera view and 1 for this. So now I can just toggle between these and have my camera views saved. So we're going to look at the fog settings in a while, but before that, we are going to tackle another issue that looks very jarring, and that is the dark shadows, high contrast shadows that we see. And this is not possible in the real world because there is so much bounce, so much GI in the world. So naturally, everything receives some sort of light. It is not absolutely dark always, unless it's a closed room with no light, right? This being an outdoor environment should not have these kind of things. So what we're going to do is we have skylight, and let's turn it on. And immediately you see that, okay, I'm going to turn off my camera. It had some issues. So immediately you can see that after adding the skylight, the shadows are not that harsh anymore, and there is some details that we can see. Right? And another great thing that you would have noticed here is the skylight's effect on water. Right here, this is just a simple plane with a material that looks like water, and it is having now suddenly so many reflections that are coming from the skylight. So it adds that level of believability and natural look to the scene. In the skylight, let's look at some of the settings in the skylight. It's very important. So the first is real-time capture. Now, what it does is that as I am moving my light, okay, so as I'm moving my light, the skylight is going to be responsive to that change and going to update real time. If I am changing, turning it off, and then moving the light, changing intensity. So let's say like I reduce from 10, I'm setting it to 5. So now something looks off, and to fix it, you can go to the skylight, scroll down, and there will be a recapture scene option and click on it. And you can see that immediately the reflection changed.
So we were looking at the skylight and we were looking at the real-time capture and how changing the intensity or changing a setting or a direction in the sun is affecting the skylight. And when we turn off real-time capture, then we have to scroll down to the recapture scene option button and click on it. After that, so I'm going to keep this real-time capture on. Okay, this is really important. I'm going to keep it on, and let's go to the sun settings and let's set it back to the default 10. Okay, so after that, we have this source type. So we can change the source of the skylight. Right now, what's happening, it is taking into account the sunlight, the sky atmosphere, everything that's in here, and then calculating the bounce. But if we want, we can use a different HDRI, a different cube map, and then use that to add the bounce. So for that, we can again turn it off, turn the real-time capture off, and in source type, we can select specified cube map. Now, right now there is nothing in the cube map, so again, all the shadows are dark. So here we can go to the cube map settings and start selecting some map. So I'm just going to select the first one, and you can see it's very bright, so it is making everything a lot more brighter than how bright the sun is. So there we have to, if we suppose want to work this way and want to use a separate cube map to add skylight, then we will have to come further down and work with these settings. Another thing in the UI that I want to mention here is this icon that we see next to browse, which says browse to approaching storm, which if I click on it, it is going to take me to the folder where this map is saved. And here you can see there are more options. Now these options are present in the engine plugin content. So if you look at the content browser and scroll up, we see the content folder is where we have everything that is saved in the project. And then there is a engine folder which has all the content that we downloaded when we downloaded the engine. So everything is going to be here. If we enable any plugins, they are also going to show up here, their content. So important thing to know. Sometimes you might not be seeing the engine folder, and the reason for that could be that it is just simply hidden. So if that happens, just on the content browser on the right corner, you see this icon, click on it, and make sure that the engine content is enabled and plugin content is also enabled. So you're going to get all the data that is in these folders. And an important thing to remember, it is not adding any memory to the project. It's not increasing the file size at all. Okay, so I can choose to go with a different cube map. I think this is also fine. Now, in a scenario when you are working with a different cube map, then it's important that you match the direction of lighting between the cube map and the direction light that we are using. In this case, the sun, right? So for a second, I'm just going to turn off the skylight and let's look around and see where the sun direction is coming from. So the sun is somewhere here. If I turn off the volumetric cloud, you can see the sun, really tiny sun, is in this corner. Okay, so all the shadows are on the right. The light is coming from the left. So in this case, when we are using the skylight, we have to make sure that it is in harmony and it should not be conflicting with the direction of the sun. So what we can do here is, okay, it keeps freezing for some reason. Okay, so if you want to change the angle in the skylight settings, there is a source cube map angle and you can change that. So of course, it's not going to be very visible from here, but let's go to the camera view that we had created, the bookmarks. And now if we change, now it's a lot easier to see if you pay attention to this area around the water surface. And you can see how the reflection, how the light is affecting. So right? And now if I'm turning off the directional light also, but I'm still seeing some light, that is because it is coming from the skylight. So the skylight is another source of light that is present in the scene because we are currently working with a specified cube map and not using real-time capture. So let's turn back the sun on and we are going to turn on the volumetric clouds. And in the skylight, I'm going to reset it to sky captured scene and turn on real-time capture. So the default setup. Now we have intensity scale. So when we are, okay, this camera is better. So if I'm increasing the intensity to like 2 or 5, just adding like crazy values to show how it is affecting. You can see suddenly like everything is super well lit. There's absolutely no shadows in there. So it looks like there's no occlusion. It looks very unreal, very odd, right? So if this is very useful in cases where you are working with a cube map because you might have to tone down the intensity of the cube map, as we saw with this particular cube map, which was just making everything too bright, no shadows at all. So if we just tone down the skylight intensity, it is going to make a huge difference. Yeah, looks good. Okay. Another thing, when we are working with lighting, you can see sometimes when I'm working, the mouse is really slow, laggy. So what I tend to do is I keep the FPS on. It is always visible, so I get an idea of how the scene is doing in terms of performance. So for that, you see this eye icon on the top of the viewport. Just click on it and go to viewport stats and click on FPS. So here we can see that the scene is running at 650 FPS. Okay, and let me show you how it can be improved or in scenarios where it is a lot better. So I have currently selected this actor, which is called the instanced foliage actor. If I turn it off, now the FPS is back to 60. So in a very basic setup, or if you optimize the scene really well, it can be a lot higher. And it should be also higher if it drops to something like lower than 20, then it becomes really hard to work with. And it is also hard to do animations in this because for when doing animation sequences, you need to have a minimum of 24 FPS. So this animation, so it gets really tough. So just keep an eye on this. Now, since we have a lot of foliage and the sunlight is creating a lot of shadows, and there is so much calculation that's going on, so the FPS drops by 10 units and it is close to 50. Just keep it open if your scene starts becoming laggy, so you'll just know. Okay, so the skylight, back to it. Now, the skylight colored by default is white, so you can change it. It being white, it has no effect. There is no color element to it. If you want, you can, if you wanted to work with something like bluish tone, you can see here that the ambient light that we are getting is more tinted. Okay, and now it is very desaturated completely. So it helps when you are again we're trying to create something stylized. You can There are a lot of options that you can explore and exploit to get uh, a different look. The effects world is there in all the lights, and it is just basically a visibility thing that is present. So what happens is if the effects world is checked, but you turn off the visibility of a light using this icon, the eye icon in our outliner, it is not visible in the scene, but if you're rendering the scene or if you click on this play icon to just to see like how the scene is looking, then the light is going to turn back on. So I've hit on play. It's going to take a few seconds to get going. Okay, I what it looks like is the other lighting is also affecting because we because it is already loaded in the scene, but it is not uh, it's not visible, but it is loaded in the screen in the level. So every time you're rendering something, anything that is there in the sub level is going to show up if it is not having that blue circle, the blue dot. So to prevent that from happening, I'm just going to right click on it and change its streaming method to blueprint. Now, if I am playing the level again, you can see there is only this one lighting scenario that is effective. Nothing else is working on it. So the FPS really dropped here. Okay, now it's better. Sometimes when it goes really down, I just tend to turn off everything and then just turn it back on, and it gets better. Okay, so where were we? We were looking at the skylight, and let's go to this camera view. Let's go to the details. So we looked at effects world. Now, if you want to turn it off, and then if you're going to play it, then the skylight is going to remain invisible. Otherwise, it is going to show up. So it works the same way for not just lights, but for every asset that is there, every actor that is there in the scene. A good way to test if you're going to get the correct thing in the render is just to play this level before you start rendering. So you get an idea of what all is going to show in the final render. So sometimes this happens when you have like multiple levels. You tend to forget that, some all are all loaded in the level. So these problems can happen. There could be a character like the mannequin that we added yesterday, which is just for reference and we don't want in the render. And it could be also rendering. So we're going to look at that setting right now. Let's quickly do that changes also. Okay, so I have selected the mannequin. Quinn is her name. And in the details panel, these are all the settings, general, actor, animation, very specific settings, and then we come to rendering. In rendering, you can see there are two options. One is visible, and then there is actor hidden in game. So if you just turn off the visibility, then it is the actor is going to be not present when you are rendering. But why is there a second option? The reason for that is, if you remember yesterday, we looked at the game mode, which is uh, when you press G on the keyboard. Okay, so I'm going to keep it on, but if I have this actor hidden in game also enabled, actually let me turn it off. Let's turn off the visibility and I'm going to play it. So here we see that the mannequin is not visible. Now let's come out of the play mode and I'm going to go and turn on the visibility, but I'm going to select actor hidden in game. And now just keep your attention here. Okay, I'm going to move away the camera. Here it is. The In the play mode, the actor will be, it's just another way of making sure that the actor is hidden when you're in the play mode or when you're rendering. Sometimes, so you have kept on the visibility because you want to use it for maybe shadow or just for scale reference. So you're not keeping it visible in the viewport, but you don't want it as part of your render. So you just select actor hidden in game and it won't be there in the render. So that's why there are two options for visibility. Okay, so now let's turn on the effects world for the skylight and we got the bounce back. Then we have cast shadows, and this is going to be better understood when we are looking at the sun settings. The sun also has the same settings. So we have cast shadows. If we turn it off, you can see everything, of course, is just getting the light directly. So there is no shadows acting in the scene. So sometimes I tend to, that's a personal choice that I do. That's my approach when I have to when I want to add a fill light using a directional light and keep it in the same direction of the sun, but just add some spill, some ambient light on the environment. Then what I tend to do is I duplicate this light. So Control D, and I'm going to duplicate the sun. Now this is it can be, you can call it like a hack also. It's your choice if you want to, if there is a situation where you want, when you're in a similar situation, you can use this method. So what I tend to do is now I have two sunlights in the scene, and I'm getting this error which says multiple directional lights are competing to be the same single one used for forward shading, blah blah blah, right? So what's happening is that now there's a uh, conflict that which one is the main sunlight. So there are two ways to fix it. First is we disable the atmosphere sunlight that we saw before. Okay. Okay. I guess this is not the one first way of fixing. So anyway, there is another way of fixing it. We look for priority, and we can just select our main sun and give it a higher priority. So I'll just put 100. And now the sky atmosphere, which we discussed in the beginning, which we looked at, the sky atmosphere works together with the main sunlight. So now it is clear that this sun is our main source of light, and the sky atmosphere and all the other environment lighting tools are going to take this light as the main source of light, and this is not conflicting, it's not taking its position or place, right? So so I'm just going to show you in which scenario or how I tend to use a second directional light. So I'm just going to call it sun fill. Okay, and I'm going to keep the direction same. I'll turn off cast shadows. So of course there is no shadow at all. But this is, of course, this doesn't work. This doesn't look good at all. So what I'm going to do is I'll change the light intensity to something like zero point 0.1. Now, zero point 0.1 might be too low, so let me set it to 1. Okay, 1 can be too high. I'll set it to 0 0.5. And now there is a very subtle ambience, ambient light that we can see is visible. Okay, so this method, it is not necessarily just for the directional light. You can use it with any of the lights just to add that spill, maybe highlight on the character. And I'll show that to you with some of the lights that we haven't looked at so far. Okay, so I will just remove this, or I can just, I'll keep it there. I'll just uh, keep the intensity really low. Okay. And then there are some lighting intensity and volumetric sky intensity, scattering intensity. And before we look into that, we are going to look at the height fog. So here it is. Here is the height fog, and there is the fog density. So we can increase the density to, let's say, a very high value like 1, and suddenly it's too dense, which of course will not work. So something like zero point 0.1 also is pretty high, but you can explore and test which what kind of a scene that you are looking at, and then use fog that in that manner. So I'm going to keep it like zero point 0.2, slightly dense. Let's create a overcast kind of lighting here. So for that, I'll just keep one sunlight, and fog is high. Then there is, after the density, we have the fog fall off. So if you want denser fog towards the ground, you can change this, increase this value. It's you're just changing the fall off setting, and somewhere like here, let me reduce this to 0.07. This is a lot better. Then there is a second fog data that you can introduce, and it is working in the same way, just adding another layer of fog in scattering color, which is just by default, it has no effect on the color of fog. If you want to add some extra density, or some, like it's a cloudy, very cloudy place, then you can add some scatter color. Then we have the fog max capacity. So these are the settings that you can touch if you want to experiment with something different. But by default, it is good to just keep them as it is. There's no need to change them. But we're going to come down to volumetric fog, which is very important. And we are going to turn it on. And immediately just keep an eye on what happens. And you can see the way fog changed completely. So this gives us a more believable fog look. And now, because it feels too much, so I can reset the fog density, and it is going to look a lot better. So you can experiment it. Then we have a scattering distribution. So this is going to increase fog in the direction of the light. So let's say the sunlight, if I am increasing the intensity to 50, okay, 50 is too high, and just keep it 20. And then I am back in the height fog and changing the scattering distribution. So let me find some angle where I can show it better. It works really well when you want to get some God rays in the scene. Okay, I think like this kind of an angle is also pretty good. So when the value is at the default, so the spread is going to be in all directions. But when you increase the value, then you see more fog in the direction of the light. So it is a really good way to experiment with God rays without having to add a mesh or a material. And then there is some more setting to change the intensity. Okay, so I'm going to go in this camera, and I will remove this light, this is the second sunlight. We have the fog here, and let's change the sunlight to sun direction, and we want to keep something like an overcast, so we'll try to get that overcast look. Now, what I will be doing here is right now we see that the shadows of the sun are too harsh. So that doesn't happen when the lighting is overcast. So we are going to go to the sunlight setting, and we have a soft angle, and we also have a source angle. So by default it is 0.5357. Now if we start increasing this angle, we can see that the shadows are getting softer. So I'm just going to put a very high number right now. Okay, if you pay attention to these regions which had a very contrasty look between the highlight and shadow, you can see that now it's very subtle, very smooth, very well blended. So this is great when you are looking for an overcast lighting, and I'm going to keep like a value like 10, and let's reduce the intensity to maybe 15. I can go in the sunlight setting and change the temperature. So right now, of course, we can see that the highlights are too strong, and that is not how overcast lighting is supposed to look. So we can change. Actually, there are multiple ways of achieving this light. Okay, and okay, so I'll just keep it here. We do not have a lot of time remaining, so I'll move on to the next part. So far we have this lighting. Let's just move it, find a better angle. Okay, I will also reduce the fog slightly. Okay, so we are going to bring in something that is called the post-process volume, and ideally we should be doing this when we are beginning to light the scene, or even better when we are starting to create the scene, we can put the post-process volume inside the level. Now this is think of it as an adjustment layer for the 3D scene, but in order to for it to work on the entire 3D scene, what we have to do is by default, this setting in post-process volume setting, there is an option called infinite extent unbound that is disabled. So we are just going to turn it on. Now, whatever changes we do to the post-process volume are going to affect the entire scene. So very quickly, let's say I will first set the exposure. So in the exposure, I am just going to change this exposure compensation. So it is going to uh, reduce some exposure from the scene, okay? And this is the minimum and maximum EV. So the values when you're like moving the camera from a bright space to a darker space, the exposure can change. So I'm just going to set them to both to 1 so that jump is not going to happen. And now I'm just going to, back in the exposure compensation, I can just set the exposure to how I want it. Okay. So right now I'm just eyeballing it. There are ways to do it more precisely, but I am just going to do it this way right now. So now if we turn off the post-process volume, there's a very subtle effect that's happening on the scene in terms of exposure. We haven't done anything else, so we don't see that happening, but we can come down to color grading and change the temperature of the scene, and you can see that how it is affecting the entire environment. And then you have some color grading options. So you can uh, do color correction, some basic stuff, and then some lighting options. Now, this can be a bit advanced, the lighting settings for this class. So I'm not going to get into this stuff right now. Okay, so we have set some temperature, and just to make it more cinematic, I am going to go to this setting called film grain, and I can add some grain here. So very subtle grain. This is really helpful when you are creating something that is very close to real footage. And then we also can add chromatic aberration. All of this is there in the post-process volume. So chromatic aberration by default, you see it's set to 0, but I can introduce some value. This might be too strong. So let's go with 0.25, and there it is. Okay. And in the post-process volume, we are currently going to look at just these settings. And now we are going to move on to the next part, which is setting a small camera sequence. So I hope so far it has been all good, all clear. I would love to go more in depth about the things that we have looked at so far, but the time doesn't allow. So I'm going to move on to the next section. Here in the content browser, I have a folder cinematics. So I am going to go here, and now we are going to create a level sequence. So how that works is on the top, you see this icon, which is the default take recorder, that cut thing that we have, right? And we have add level sequence. So we will create a new level sequence. We'll call it short zoom. Okay, we already have that, so I'll just call it short pan. Now, this is similar to any editing software, and the level sequence is a very powerful tool, or the sequencer as we call it, because it allows animation of literally anything that is there in the level. So you can animate the character in the level sequence, you can animate materials in the level sequence, you can animate light, environment, you can absolutely do absolutely anything using the level sequence. And it has many, many tools to work with complicated scenarios also. So the first thing that we will be doing here we have this camera, but we're gonna switch to our other camera, which we created yesterday. and that was called the cine camera actor. So I'm just going to select it and bring it to the sequencer. Now you can see that immediately the view changed, right? And the reason for that is that in the in the sequencer, we have something called the camera cut track. So if I, let's say I'll just delete it. Now I just have the camera. Next to the camera, there is an icon which says lock cine camera actor to the selected viewport. And when I click it, the viewport has the view that you see through the camera. Okay. But now when I want to render the sequence, I need to establish that exactly if I have, like, let's say I have multiple cameras in this sequencer. So I need to tell that which camera I want to render. And for that, I need a camera cut track. So I will add I'll open this add icon and I will add a camera cut track. In the camera cut track, I will click on this plus icon and I will bind this camera to the one that we have in the sequencer or the one that we want visible in the viewport or use for rendering. Right now you can see the FPS is set to 30, so we can change that to 24 or 25, whichever you want to work with. And now I can click on this icon. So the camera cut is locked. Okay, this is a sequence for 120 frames of sequence. So what I'll do is I'll add another camera, which was the wide angle camera, and let me bring that here as well. Okay, so now what I want is that after halfway, I want to switch the camera cut to this wide angle camera. Okay, or I'll add first, we'll look at the wide angle camera and then we'll look at the close up. So what I can do is right click on the camera cut track and we can go to edit and split section. So now we have two camera, the camera cut track is just one, but we have a split. And here we can change the binding. So we go to properties, and in camera binding ID, we select the other camera. Okay. Right now, nothing changed because the camera cut is not locked. So now, as we are moving in the sequencer, you can see how the camera view is changing, right? So let's save it. Okay, right now we don't have any animation, so let's just add a simple camera movement. So we are going to first select this transform, okay, and I will add a keyframe. Now, I believe you must be familiar with keyframes, and some are already working in Blender, so you're very used to this concept. So I'm just going to add a keyframe here and slightly, okay. Okay, this is the wrong camera. Undo. This is the first camera that we are viewing, so we are going to go in the settings and start moving. Okay, so I'll just add, because I'm just moving it on x-axis, so I'm just going to add a key on x-axis and then on 60th frame, 59th, I'll just move it slightly towards the center. Now let's just see how it is looking. Okay, so right now the keys that we have set are having weighted tangents. So I'm just going to set it to linear. So the movement is doesn't have any ease in, ease out. Okay. The shortcut to play the sequence is spacebar. Okay, so I have this. And then from this angle where the camera cut goes to the second frame, second camera, I will just add another pan. So I will just move this. Instead of adding a pan, let me add, I'll just go closer to the subject. Okay, and I'm gonna add another keyframe on the Z axis, which is the vertical axis in Unreal. And this is our, this is the sequence. So let's set these keyframes also to linear. And now when we are playing the sequence, okay, I can just slow down this movement so I can take the keys outside of this region, which is the region marked by these sliders, or what do you call them? I can't find it. I don't remember their name for some reason. Okay, I'm just going to invert these keys. So the movement, there's a bit of continuity that we are losing here. So first the camera moves from left to right, and then it has that right to left movement. So just to, okay, maybe I will remove those keyframe from Z axis, and okay, so wrong axis. I'll just do a simple shot here and setting another keyframe on X. Now, if you want to expand the timeline, you can click Control on the keyboard and just move the middle mouse scroll, and that works. Okay, there it is. Setting these to linear, and I'll just move these keyframes slightly more. I'm just trying to keep them outside, like I don't want them exactly at the camera cut position where the camera changes. Okay, all right. So this is our sequence. I'm going to remove the Z animation again. And if you notice that whenever I am pressing spacebar, the mannequin disappears, and that is because we had set it as actor hidden in game. So whenever you press the spacebar, it's the final game view that you see. Okay, so let's select, save this sequence. Right. Now I am going to quickly show another camera setting that we have. It's going to be very useful here. And in the cine sub tool, we have camera rig rail. So we have two rig rails, so camera rig rail and cine camera rig rail. We're going to bring in the cine camera rig rail. Now I want to get out of this camera mode, so I'll just click on this. So now I'm not locked to the viewport. This camera is not locked. Now let's go closer to the rig rail. Okay, and I'm just going to bring it up. So this is very similar to an actual rig rail on which you place the camera, and then you get a very smooth camera motion. So what I'm going to do is I will place it here. Okay, and this rig rail, I can extend it. So to extend the side, it is using some splines. I can add more spline points and I can create a path on which the camera will move. So to create the path, what I'll do is you see these points. I can select one point, right click on it, and in the settings, there is going to pop a menu is going to pop up, and you will see the spline generation panel. So I can select arc, and it is going to create this arc for me. And because I want the camera to move in a bigger radius, so I can increase this radius to somewhat like 1000, reduce the degrees, so like 35. Otherwise, there was a very sharp turn that would happen. And I can increase the number of points, so the motion is a lot clear and a lot smooth. Let's just can close it, and we have gotten a rig rail. Now, in order to work with this, okay, we have two rig rails somehow. So if you have anything selected in the viewport and you're accidentally you have pressed Alt and then you move the transform, then you're going to create a duplicate. So duplicate you can create by selecting the actor in the outliner and clicking on Control D, or you can also in the viewport you can just click on all and then move the transform. So you're gonna get a copy. So probably that's what happened with the cine camera rig rail with me. Okay, so I'm just going to place it here. I'll place it here and I'll save it. And I am going to take this to the camera section, and I will take this uh, other camera that we are not using. And okay, right, I will parent it to the rig rail. So currently it is not moving because they're not in the same level. Okay, so this rig rail, because I had lighting scene 2 selected, so it went on to this level. So I'll just click on persistent level and I'll move the camera rig rail to the persistent level. So now I will be able to parent it. Here it is. Then let's get in this view. Um, okay, I'll go to the cinematic viewport. Okay, actually, let me create a new camera. Cine camera actor. I'm not naming this right now. Okay, where are we in the environment? Here it is. Okay, so here we are. This is the camera, and we can just parent it to the rig rail. And actually, there was no point of setting this camera here. If we get out of this viewport and I press G, so you can see this is the rig rail, and our camera is, where is our camera? It's pretty far, I think. So I'm just going to reset its position. Okay. And I will, yesterday we saw how to use enable look at tracking to orient the camera on one direction. So I'm going to do that same thing today. Okay, so this is now locked to this view, and I'm just going to set an offset. Okay, and after this, what happens here is that in the camera, cine camera rig rail setting, if we turn off the absolute uh, position on, not turning it off, we have this absolute position on rail. If we move this, if we change the value, you can see that the camera is just traveling on the rig rail. So it gives you a very smooth motion when you want to have a shot like this. So what we will do is we're gonna put this rig rail in the level sequence that we had, add it here, and now I want this option because I want to animate this option, absolute position on rail. So I will, to get that option in the sequencer, I will have to click on this plus icon next to the Cine Camera rig rail and look for the option, the same option in the settings, and here it is. Now if I am, and I'll also bring in the camera. Okay, so the camera view is there. And now if I'm changing the absolute position, you can see how the view is changing. Okay, so I'll just put a key here, and in the end of the sequence, I'll put a key. Okay, currently there is a subtle jerk in the motion, so just to fix it, we can turn off this absolute position option and we can use the current position on rail. So let's add that option here in the current position and keyframe it. Go to the last frame and then change it. Okay, right, okay, this is not acting because I have this keyframed, the absolute position on rail. So this is where it gets very interesting because CineCam, because we're working with the sequencer and we have already keyed a parameter, so the other one has no effect on it. So to allow the other parameter to have effect on the camera, we can, or whatever, if you want to disable a track, you can right click on the track and select mute. So now the other track should work. Let me see. Okay, and let me delete this completely. Okay, and check this. Okay, now it is working. So I am just going to set these keyframes to linear. And in the second camera cut track, let's change this camera. Okay, so we've added like another a new camera with the camera rig rail. So we're going to just bind that one to the camera track. So now if we are looking at this, let's press G. Okay, there is still a subtle jerk in it. So maybe we can set it back to absolute position, or we can just reduce the angle and the amount of movement in it. Okay, and okay, this is looking better. So what the last thing that I'm going to do in this sequence is, in this camera, I want to move the camera slightly. So I'll just take it up. So back to the camera, look at tracking settings. In the relative offset, let's just change this value, 38. Let's save it. And let's set the focus to this subject. Now, interesting thing, you can see that the focus is not changing, focal length is not changing, and the aperture is also not changing. So why is this happening? Now that is these parameters are being also controlled by the cine camera rig rail. Okay, I hope this is not confusing. Um, just bear with me, it's going to be fine. It's a small setting that is there in the cine camera rig rail. In the attachment section, we have this camera option, location and rotation. So what it says is that these values are going to be overriding the camera values. So if I don't want that happening, then I can uncheck camera, and now whatever camera focal length I'm setting, that is going to come from the camera and not from the cine camera rig rail. So I will just set it to, I'll keep it set to 35, and I'll just set this focus on the can, on the trash can, and just okay, and looks good. So this is our sequence. Okay, now the last thing, uh, personally, like, I love changing aspect ratios, and I'm going to do the same thing here just to make it more cinematic. So in the crop settings, in every camera, you're going to have this option called crop settings, and you can change the aspect ratio through here. So remember, we had the film back settings in the top. Now, if you want to keep the same fill back, change the crop, this is a great way to do that. So now the aspect ratio is much wider. And I'm going to do the same for the other camera as well. I'll just set it to 2.39. Let's save it. Now this is our entire sequence. And finally, we are going to render this. We're going to do a very quick, simple render. Just before that, I am going to show you a way to add some fade in, fade out in the sequence. And to do that, I'm going to go in the add section in the sequencer and add a fade track. So we will just key it. In the beginning, it's going to be 1. Um, okay, and after a few frames, let's set it to 0. And then it's the same thing we're going to do for the last end of the sequence. So here I'm going to set it to 0 and end this again. 1. Let's save all. Okay, so this is our sequence. How do you think it looks? How do you think the camera lighting is? And just be, crazy with how you want to try, just experiment different lenses, different lighting setups, and just show us what you create. Okay. And finally, we are going to render it. So now this is a very big subject when it comes to rendering. So we're not going to go very deep in it. We're just going to do a quick, simple image sequence render. Okay. So this icon here in the sequencer, it is going to open this movie render queue for you. It's going to have some details you can see here. The job is the shot that you have created. So this is the shot. Then there are some settings where you can set the render settings. This is the output directory. So you can set the output directory where you want the render to be. And some additional settings on the side is again the sequence, the level that is associated with the sequence, and this is important. Now let's go to the settings, open the unsaved config, and we are going to see there is by default set as a JPEG sequence, so you can turn it off or just delete it. I tend to render always with a PNG sequence. It does it's lossless, but not as heavy as a TIFF or EXR. Plus, EXR is also not needed when I'm not doing a lot of color correction in post work. So I tend to go with a PNG sequence. And then there are some more settings that are going to be useful. So anti-aliasing we're going to add. This is just going to increase the samples that are being used in the render. So I'm not going to explain much on the talk about this much, but let's just change some values. So in the temporal sample count, I'll just increase this to 4, and I will click on this override anti-aliasing and set it to a different method. Now, this is again, as I mentioned, it's a very vast topic. Every setting has a reason why you go with a number, a particular value. So you can look at the Unreal Engine documentation later to understand what it is doing and what is needed for your use case. Then there is this game overrides, which I will just keep it on. So I'll just put it there and now set the output path. So let's yeah, okay, this is a good. I'm not going to put anything in the content folder because it's going to start importing inside the project. So outside the content folder, you can just create a render folder and create a version and select folder. FPS, just make sure that the frame rate is correct. So you can override it from here. You can change the output resolution from here and click on accept. And then before rendering this, I tend to set the viewport to unlit mode so it doesn't take up memory and the render is efficient. So now I can click on render local. So while this is happening, I'm going to open DaVinci. Okay. DaVinci is a free editing software. It also allows you to do color grading and a lot of other stuff. It's similar to Adobe, but just most of the features, or like some of the very important basic features, are like free. So it is compiling all the shaders. It might take some time. So if you have any questions so far, just put it on the chat. I hope it's been a good session for you guys, and you're getting more comfortable with the Unreal. There is there is Epic Developers Community, which has a lot of free tutorials that are there by the Unreal instructors, so you can check that out. I will share that link on the chat. Okay. Now remember the subsample here is showing 4, so that is directly connected to what we set in the anti-aliasing settings, the value that we set. This is how the sequence is looking. If in a situation where you don't see the same camera, it is not working, then just make sure that you have the camera cut track in the shot that you are rendering. Otherwise, it can just be a random camera angle. So that's a very common issue that can happen when you are working for the first time with Unreal, or like rendering for the first time something. Okay, so I'm just going to do a new project, create. I'll import this sequence here, and then we can look at the vendor. Okay, okay, I think I'm forgetting like uh, how to import the level sequence, not the level sequence, the image sequence. Okay, it is importing there is a setting somewhere here that I have to change. Okay, transition, no. Okay, so I think I am missing the part where I have to change the import settings to be able to import the files as an image sequence. There is something strange happening here. Let me open this folder though. So when we look at the render, this is the output. The black bars that you're seeing here is because we changed the output resolution. So we have a wider ratio, but the resolution is still set to 16 and by 9. So that is the reason why it is looking strange, or it has those bars in the top. So I'm going to stop the session here. Uh, Virginie and I are going to say some last words and then we can wrap it up. If you have any questions, please reach out to us on Discord.
Well, your camera is not working, but I'm sure you're there.
Yeah, I'll just keep it off.
Well, first of all, thank you so much, Nida, for the workshop. That was amazing. A lot of information, a lot of good things. Thank you so much for doing that.
Uh, yeah, it was like our first workshop with WIA, and we had some technical glitches. Still are having it.
We'll figure it out for the next time, I think. Yeah.
Yeah,
I think Unreal is
yeah,
frying your computer.
I think it is. Yeah, it's really like my PC is like really hot. Like I can, the room is hot, and yeah, that's what happens, right? Everybody like learning it now. They're gonna have like start having the same problems. Yeah. But thanks
Yes.
a lot, Virginie, for helping on the chat and helping everybody with their time and giving the support.
To ask us any questions on Discord after, I'll be keeping an eye on it for the next few days if you want to try something and you're not sure. If you're looking for documentation, we're here to help. So yeah, don't hesitate to ask for help even at post workshop. We'll be here.
Yeah.
And please let us know if there's something you want us to deep dive into. Maybe that can make us have ideas for a future workshop. Something was not clear or something that you thought looked really cool and Nida didn't have the time to do everything because it's a big engine and there's so many things to cover. So yeah, don't hesitate to let us know.